You know, what happens when you die? It's literally the oldest question in human history. I mean, for a lot of us today, death is kind of viewed as this final rest, right? A peaceful transition. But for the ancient Egyptians? Oh man, absolutely not. For them, death was just the beginning of this terrifying, high-stakes obstacle course. It definitely wasn't a time to kick back and rest. It was a literal, desperate fight for survival.
So welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack one of the absolute most fascinating and, let's be real, complex belief systems of the entire ancient world. Think of this as your ultimate survival guide for defeating death and securing eternal life, straight out of the tombs of ancient Egypt. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our actual survival map for the soul's perilous journey. We're going to start with number 1, preparing for eternity. Then number 2, navigating the underworld, facing number 3, the ultimate judgment, and finally, reaching number 4, the field of reeds.
All right, section 1, preparing for eternity, equipping the soul for the ultimate journey.
So the absolutely crucial thing you have to understand right off the bat is that surviving death was not a solo mission, not at all. To grasp why the living had to do so much work for the dead, we actually have to look at the ancient Egyptian concept of the split soul. They believed the immortal soul had distinct parts, right? First you have the Ka, which was basically your life force. Then you have the Ba, which was kind of your mobile personality. But here's the terrifying catch. Even after you died, your Ka could still literally starve to death. Yeah, and this is exactly why the living had to constantly leave food, clothing, and valuable ornaments in the tombs. If your relatives forgot to feed your Ka, well, your afterlife journey was completely over before it even began. And, you know, the physical body, which they called the Hat, that also played a massive role here. The Egyptians obviously realized that bodies decay, right? So they developed the whole mummification process to create this permanent, super safe vessel for the spirit to actually return to. I mean, the process was intense. It involved dismembering and meticulously preserving the body, binding this magical amulet called a heart scarab right to the chest, and then wrapping the whole shebang up in protective bandages. They were literally trying to build an indestructible physical anchor for the human soul. Now, what's really fascinating about this is how the actual access to eternal life completely changed over time. Early on, back in the Old Kingdom, the magical spells you needed to navigate the afterlife, the pyramid texts, were exclusive to pharaohs. It was strictly VIP access only. But skip ahead to the Middle Kingdom, and we see these coffin texts emerging, which kind of started opening the door for common people. And then finally, by the New Kingdom, all these spells evolved into the Book of the Dead, which was essentially a democratized collection of cheat codes for eternity that was available to anyone who could afford it. And actually, we should really clarify what the Book of the Dead truly was. Because it wasn't just some regular book of prayers. No way. It was a highly practical, incredibly extensive survival manual. Usually written on papyrus and placed right there in the tomb, it was packed with magical spells, passwords, and explicit, step-by-step advice. You absolutely needed this knowledge to get past the literal monsters and traps that were just waiting for you in the dark.
Moving on to section 2, navigating the underworld, the terrors of the Duat.
Okay, so put yourself in their shoes for a second. Imagine you've just woken up inside your tomb. Your body's all wrapped up, you've got your Book of the Dead in hand, and it is time to step out into the darkness. You are now officially entering the Duat, the incredibly dangerous Egyptian underworld, and the only entrance is right through your tomb. Now, the stakes here are unbelievably high. If you fail in the Duat, you don't just go to some bad place. You suffer what they called the second death. In ancient Egyptian texts, this was often represented as decapitation, meaning your soul was utterly, completely annihilated. You simply ceased to exist forever. Gone. Standing between you and paradise is an absolute gauntlet. We're talking over 1,000 gates, doors, and massive pylons inside the Duat. To even have a fighting chance at getting through all that, souls heavily relied on deities like Wepawat. He was this jackal god whose specific, literal job was to open the ways through the underworld. But hey, even with a divine guide, you still had to face the guards. And let me tell you, these guards were no joke. Every single gate is guarded by a minor deity, and they're usually depicted as these terrifying animal-human hybrids holding enormous, incredibly threatening knives. Plus, they have names that are clearly designed to evoke pure terror. I mean, imagine walking up to a giant gate and having to face He Who Dances in Blood, or the Mistress of Anger, or maybe a hunting dog god named Amhe, which literally translates to the Devourer of Millions.
There is absolutely no way you're fighting them. The only way they'll let you pass is if you know their secret, hidden names, essentially using them as a password. If your copy of the Book of the Dead didn't have their name, you were finished.
So as you go even deeper into this gauntlet, you eventually encounter the Lake of Fire. Now, this is a super fascinating location because of its wild dual nature. It's guarded by flaming braziers and baboons. Yep, baboons. For the sun god Ra, this lake is actually where he renews his solar boat. And for a prepared soul, someone who recites the correct magical passwords, the baboons will actually refresh and protect you. But for the enemies of the gods, or just a soul who showed up unprepared, those baboons and that fire will ensure your permanent, agonizing destruction. Talk about high stakes, right?
Which brings us to Section 3, the ultimate judgment, the Hall of Ma'at.
Okay, so if you somehow manage to survive the monsters, the 1,000 gates, and the literal lake of fire, you have finally arrived at the climax of your journey. It's time for the gods to judge your actual worthiness. But before the real judgment can even begin, you have to undergo what's called the negative confession. Picture this. You have to stand before 42 individual judges, known as the assessors of Ma'at. You must correctly address every single one of them by their secret name, and then flawlessly name and deny a specific sin you did not commit during your lifetime. I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not lied. Basically, you have to prove to them that you are entirely, 100% pure.
And this brilliantly sets up what is arguably the most famous moment in all of Egyptian mythology, the weighing of the heart. So the jackal-headed god Anubis takes your actual physical heart, which they viewed as the ultimate record of all your life's deeds, and he places it on a literal scale. On the opposite side of the scale is the feather of Ma'at, which represents cosmic truth and balance. Meanwhile, the ibis-headed god Thoth is standing right there, pen in hand, just waiting to record your official final result. But here is where the ancient Egyptians were just incredibly clever. They completely understood that humans are flawed. I mean, what if your own heart decided to suddenly confess to a sin you actually did commit? Remember that heart scarab amulet we talked about back during the mummification stage? Well, this was its exact purpose. It was essentially a magical gag order, bound directly over the mummy's chest. It contained specific spells designed to force the heart into silence. It literally physically prevented your own heart from snitching on you and bearing false witness during this ultimate test. How crazy is that?
And honestly, you really, really needed that cheat code, because the penalty for failure here was absolute. Sitting right there, right beneath the scales, is Ammit the Devourer. She's this absolutely terrifying hybrid goddess, part crocodile, part lion, and part hippopotamus. If your heart was heavy with sin and ended up outweighing the feather of truth, Anubis would just feed your heart directly to Ammit. Boom, your soul would be instantly and entirely wiped from existence. Game over.
Let's move on and see how this builds up in Section 4, the Field of Reeds, Sekhet-Aaru, and the Promise of Paradise. So, you pass the terrifying gates, your heart successfully balanced on the scales. What exactly is your big reward? Your reward is Sekhet-Aaru, better known as the Field of Reeds. Now, the really amazing thing about the ancient Egyptian paradise is how deeply grounded it was in their everyday reality. It wasn't some fuzzy, abstract realm floating up in the clouds. No, it was an idealized, totally perfect version of Egypt. You get lush, super fertile farming land, you get unrestricted access to the Nile, you get to eat and drink the exact same incredible delicacies as the gods themselves. And beautifully, you actually gain the ability to communicate directly with deities and even reunite with the loved ones you had previously lost. You essentially get to do everything you loved in life, just completely without the suffering.
But wait, this wasn't just some static, boring retirement. Eternal life for them was viewed as this incredibly active, magical cycle. Ancient texts actually describe the soul returning to the mother goddess's womb, where all their decayed fluids are driven away and their limbs are miraculously reunited and completely healed. The deceased basically joins the exact same cycle as the sun god Ra. Just as the sun sets into the underworld and is reborn every single morning without fail, the triumphant soul is continuously restored and reborn for all of eternity. It's a beautiful concept. Now, before we wrap up today, there's a truly fascinating historical detail about who exactly got to participate in this whole rebirth process. According to researchers, like the amazing Egyptologist Kathleen M. Cooney, the creator gods and the actual act of resurrection were heavily associated with masculine virility, specifically tied to Osiris, the ruler of the underworld. So, to ensure they wouldn't be excluded from rebirth simply because of their gender, ancient Egyptian women ingeniously redefined themselves in death.
They would literally engrave the name Osiris right before their own given names on their coffins. By doing this, they were adopting the necessary masculine attributes to guarantee they could appease the gods and actually achieve resurrection. Just a brilliant workaround. When you really step back and look at it, the sheer amount of effort, resources, and pure imagination the ancient Egyptians poured into conquering death is just staggering. It wasn't just a religion to them, it was a total societal obsession with overcoming the end. And it really makes you wonder. Today, we pour billions into medical science, longevity research, and even digital legacies, constantly trying to push off the inevitable. As we seek to extend our own lives in the modern age, are we really so different from them? Or are we still just frantically searching for our own modern Book of the Dead? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope this completely changes how you view the ancient quest for immortality.